I could die happy knowing I've got my name back. I was homeless at 11, living on the streets, living in vans, hanging out in liquor stores during the day. So, for me, like there was like nowhere to go but up. So it's really sad what they did to the kids. And eventually I just kind of gave up for a while. I'm like, I'm just this new person. And there was like this, what they call the gun to the head, where you got to pick a new name or else. And so I had that for like 16 years.
Welcome to the DTC Insider Podcast, where online business owners come to find actionable tips and tactics to grow their businesses. Now, here's your host, Brian Roisenthal.
Hey, welcome to another episode of the DTC Insider Podcast. I'm Brian Roisenthal, your host, and today I'm super excited to interview Jay Keeney, the founder of WhyBars. Hey, Jay, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. So why don't you start by telling the audience more about WhyBars?
So WhyBars is one of my creations. I've had plenty of recipes over the years, and it's something that I had just in all the cookbooks that I had put together, and it kind of blossomed into this whole brand of a superfood snack bar, chia seed base, and one bar helps curb your appetite for up to 3 hours. That's kind of our main shtick. Very similar to other energy bars, with about 1/3 of the sugar on average.
Right. So you just mentioned that. So I wanted to ask you, what pushed you into creating another bar company? I know there are many companies of everything, so it's not the only thing, but what made you say there is a gap in the market that, I want to do it. I want to go for it.
Well, there's a lot of things that I found in the market. It's kind of a whole, like, things that I couldn't see in the world. Like, I don't want to eat another protein bar or another date-based bar. Even my time in the Army, we had like these Ranger MRE bars, and they're like 60 grams of sugar. And it's like, it's great for about a half hour, but then you crash down, or ones with caffeine. So I wanted something that was focused more on satiety, and fiber, I think, is really the hack no one talks about. I mean, protein's an important macro, fat, carbs as well, but the fiber, if you can curb someone's appetite, that's huge, and keep those energy levels going. And a lot of it was just experimenting in my kitchen. I put stuff together. The original flavor was the chocolate peanut, although before it was even in our current film, I used to call it monkey bars, and I would just wrap them in film, like a cellophane film, and I would go door to door to these places and just, hey, try this, try this. And I just got feedback every time. I'm always tweaking. And that's something that eventually evolved to not just one flavor, but 7. And we based it on the ancient nutrition of like Central and South America, where they had the chia seeds. Specifically, the Aztec and the Mayans, they would take chia seeds, cacao beans, grind them up, and make bars out of them. And the challenge, though, is it got lost in history. And with cacao and chia seeds, they used them as money. That was how they transacted, how they paid taxes before the Spanish came. What's ironic is even now we still get our chia seeds from that same region, and also with Mexico and the Terra Humera. So it kind of all blends together, where these people are running 200-300 miles living on chia seeds. So there's a lot of like things that came together. And even in culinary school, I was known for like sleeping in class. I love the cooking classes, but then all the other ones, I'd just be sitting there sleeping. And one day this guy walked in our class and just started pointing us out and said, "Get outside." And I'm like, "What's going on? This is weird." And it was for the Food Network. They wanted to do a TV show in our town. And so after that, I thought, I can't be sleeping in class. I got to keep my energy up. Like that just doesn't happen. It led to obviously me writing cookbooks and the monkey bar recipe, and it kind of evolved into what's known as WhyBars now. And then it's kind of our tagline is "Why not?" People were like, "Why should I eat your bar?" I'm like, "Why not?" It's fun.
Yeah, I mean, but different entrepreneurs, different backgrounds. In your case, you mentioned, I guess you're a chef, right? You mentioned cooking class. Okay, so could you please tell us more about your background? Like, what were you even doing before launching this company? And when did you, by the way, we didn't say that.
So it all really starts back in 2009. So 2009 to 11, I went to culinary school, MCTC, or also known as Mount West Community and Tech College. It kind of grew out of Marshall University in West Virginia. So they eventually split off, but it was kind of a lot of buildings and just, early school atmosphere. And from there, I was also in the military. So I did Army Reserves for 6 years as a cook. And so I was always working. I had my apprenticeship, or they call them like lab practicum hours, internship at our catering buildings. So I did that as well. So I had anywhere from 3 to 4 jobs plus working at a fine dining restaurant down the street. So it was all just, trying to keep my energy up. And while I was there, worked with the Food Network for 3 months, worked on my book, Organic Food Matters. And out of that, it really spawned the creation of monkey bars. And I sat on that recipe for maybe 8 years. I kept working restaurants thinking, oh, okay, maybe that's something I could license it or do something down the road. And eventually I kind of got burned out of restaurants. So about 8 years into that, I was kind of looking for that escape of like, I got to like start my own company, something. And so I remember that recipe I had and I thought there's something there. I couldn't describe it. Like, I just got to keep making it. And I would go to these craft shows, health foods, expos and stores, trying to figure out like, is this going to work? So I took all of 2017 and I thought, let me try the juice bars. Let me see door to door, is this going to work? And one of the shows I went to was in Royal Oak here, nearby. It was at the Royal Oak Farmers Market, and it was like a New Year expo. And I showed up early, and it was icy day in January. And I looked around, like, man, this is a big show. Like this, I'm out here just selling books, just going crazy stuff. And so I brought a bunch of the monkey bars I chopped up to sample with the book. And everybody's tasting them. And I sold like 21 copies. I'm like, holy crap, like that's a lot of books, like no one does that. And when I was there, Channel 7 News came by and said, hey, do you want to be on TV? I'm like, I mean, how
Why
can you say
not?
no? Yeah, I mean, I'm like, let's do it, and I got nervous too. I'm like, man, I'm starting to sweating, and I looked down and I had the monkey bars, and I put it up, and people all over the place saw that, and so eventually I thought, I wonder, if these would sell in stores. And this gentleman came up to me the end of the day. His name was Jay, so I'm like, oh, that's cool. And he's like, hey, I have a coffee shop down the street. Can I buy those bars? And I'm like, I don't even know what he's talking about. Like, I just sample them. I have no idea. So I said, well, let me get back to you. A month went by and I thought, hey, I could sell these as like a wholesale thing on the side, just see if it works. And he would pay me for like, I would just wrap tons of these bars and show up on Main Street in a store. And eventually it's like, hey, can you make me like scones and granola and like molasses cookies, like Frisbees. And I would be going there almost every week, just all these things. And eventually I thought, hey, let me try some other health food stores, juice bars. Like Beyond Juice down here is really, really big. And I would go to the mall, in the mall with a giant box of bars, and I would go up to their counter, just broad daylight, and I would just throw them all over the counter. And they're like, who's this crazy guy, And I started doing it just day after day. And eventually the manager was like, come back inside, come in the back. And so I go back there and she writes out a check. And she's like, hey, this is for you. And for that entire year, I would call on Fridays. And eventually I would get all 5 of the Beyond Juices. And I would say, hey guys, this is Chef Jay. Do you guys need any monkey bars? And the guy would be on the phone. Hey guys, do we need monkey? Like the whole store, the whole place would hear it. And I'm like, that's the coolest thing. And I eventually got like 10 stores like that. And I'm just making them out of my house. Like, I'll just figure it out. And, eventually I guess in a nutshell, met my team shortly after and built it up. They had been in the bar industry and they said, hey, we have a kitchen. Do you want to rent it out? Now at the time it was like 4X what my apartment rent was. So I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to do that. And it's a lot of just like, I guess you would say law of attraction. The right people came in and then we put together, board of directors, and it's like, figure Shark Tank. I've got 8 investors. Like, holy moly! Like we're a real brand, and it's just one of our biggest accomplishments. Now we're in of all the stores, the biggest one is Kroger, here in Michigan, which is that's about as big as it gets. I mean, there's other stores as well, but Kroger's kind of the big top store.
Wow, congrats. You said something about the law of attraction, and I I think that you have done what every successful entrepreneur that I have interviewed, at least here in the podcast or met, have done. They have done the basics, the fundamentals. They have done, as some people say, the reps every single day. They show up and they are present where they need to be. And of course, when you're present where you need to be over and over and over again, I don't know if it was Alex Ramosi or somebody else who said that extraordinary results are not accomplished by doing extraordinary actions. They're accomplished by doing ordinary actions for an extraordinary period of time. So you did that. So of course, if you do that, and if you're consistent and if you pay attention, listen, improve, and show up and show up and show up over and over, opportunities will come. I must admit that the TV appearance, the first one probably was something
Oh
like
yeah.
that. It was
Well,
unexpected.
I'm also known for a lot of my sayings, and one of them that comes to mind is if you work on your gifts, they'll make room for you. And it's as well as like acronyms and all the things that are in my head. It's just like I got to start writing this down because I'm working on book 7. Because people are like, "What's your story?" And I'm like, "Well, I can't just
Seven,
tell
you
you
said?
like this." Yeah, so this one is my 6th one. I just put out a couple months ago. That's kind of the origins of WhyBars is in there. I mean, I've always dreamed to like have my own cookbook. I'm like, if I could just have this one book, and I had all these other ideas. I'm like, just things that I couldn't find in the world. I'm like, I got to write that. Like, it's crazy to say the books are more for me. Sounds kind of weird, but it's things I couldn't find in the world. I put them together, and I'm like, wow, like someone reads this, like just their mind is going to be like blown. I mean, this one in particular took like 16 years. So it's the world's only cookbook with obviously not the Y-bars formulas today, but all just personal recipes. And I broke down all the nutrition facts for all the recipes. And people always ask me, like, where do you get iodine, vitamin C, D, all this stuff? And after a while, I'm like, I have no idea. I got to look that up. And so, it also goes into the deep dive of nutrition all in one. You find bits and pieces online, but it's not like all together. Like, what happened to the medical industry? Why is everybody on allopathic, not naturopathic medicine? How it ties into diseases now. And I'm obviously very careful. I'm like, food doesn't cure disease, but I think the whole mindset should be prevention and people should know what they're eating, the why, because, it's not just about taking the food dyes out or this and that. There's a whole avenue for every person. And
Yeah.
nutrition and food, they're very intertwined. There's no like you can't eat bad food and expect to have a great life. Like there's no way out. There's death, taxes, and eating well. Like you got to do all three. That's just how life works.
Well, now I'm super curious, and I think the audience is too. And even though this podcast is about e-commerce growth and all the stuff, I think that to grow a brand, to grow a business, a person in charge, a founder, CEO, whatever, they need to be, focused. They need to be in their flow. They need to be doing the right things at the right
Uh-huh.
time to make it work. And this is part of who you are, based on what you said. This is for you. You wrote the books for you. And I don't think it's weird. I think it's actually something that it's super helpful because it looks like, correct me if I'm wrong, that you are documented everything you learn for
Uh-huh.
you and for others. And that's amazing. That's why, like, I don't write books. So I'm curious to ask you the following, but
Uh-huh.
I do take a lot of notes to remember the interesting things that I probably not, I don't take enough notes as I should, but I try to document things for myself too, because moments go in a blink, and they vanish and we don't remember the next day or even hours later. So it's cool to find something, in this case, writing, that it might bring you whatever emotions. It could be peace, it could be, creativity, it could be whatever that helps you be a better person, a better professional, and put you in that flow state that you can, be a better entrepreneur. Why not?
Uh-huh.
What's your process for documenting, for not writing one or two books, like 7 books?
I mean, I really the main thing, I just every day, like I've been working on obviously Y-bars since day one, but with the books and just everything together, I'm always writing. I'm very, I guess you'd say analog. So I have just a stack of notebooks empty and I'm just like, you know, back to school time, I buy them cheap, just writing. And I do plug a lot of stuff online, like if I'm doing logs or, I try to store in both capacities. So if something goes wrong with the paper or you lose it online, the cloud, like there's multiple spots. But I've always kind of been that way. Even when I was a child, I give this example when I was in kindergarten, my very first day, I walked in, I looked around, and I thought, wow, this is going to be fun. School, like I'm excited. They got snacks, all this stuff. And for whatever reason, everybody's playing with toys and eating snacks. And I found myself there writing on the first day. And I look around and I'm like, wow, look at this alphabet. I'm writing it out. And I thought, you know what? This alphabet's got to change. I need a new letter. I'm trying to remember where it was. It was towards the end of the alphabet, like between maybe W or V, somewhere in there. And I drew out this elaborate symbol for a letter. I put it together. There was like paper and an envelope, and I sign it. And on the way out, I give it to the teacher, Mrs. Kim. I said, "Hey, I have this new letter. I want it on the alphabet. Have it on the, up top, add it on Monday." And everybody just kind of looks at me like, wow, like I'm like 4, not even 5 yet. I was just always in that writing state. And even when I grew up, years later, I would live in all these different states in the military. I just always had these ideas, and, you capture them because as soon as your memory fails you, poof, they're gone. But no, that's the thing. And now I've kind of expanded in like YouTube videos and Instagram, TikTok. A lot of it is short form because people's attention span is so short. But I tie it in with not only the book but the bars and how it all kind of feeds together. Because if you're eating good, you're reading good. Those positive messages, those positive energy. That's really what it comes down to is energy. Everything's an energetic exchange. So not just the money, but just what you're doing, the people you're around. I mean, I do go to the markets a lot and I see so many people and you can tell the vibes like either really good or really bad. And it's just much of the world is very negative. And so to be positive, you have to be that much more aggressive to, bring good ideas to the world. And, I always say like love over fear, right? It's just so many people live in that dark, lower vibrational stage. What's the point of that? It's more to life than that.
Well, what you just said just blew my mind, about what you did in kindergarten. I'm a father of 6-year-old twins, a boy and a girl. So they are in last year of kindergarten, and they started writing probably this year. So if you were 4 when you did that, they didn't even know what the alphabet was back then. So that's amazing. So yeah, I mean, you mentioned the content creation, and I feel that, as you said, that might be or not related to what you do with the books, because some people love doing one thing but not the other, and that's fine. They love writing in private when they feel that there's a flow for doing that, but they don't like being on camera or recording videos, whatever. What do you do? Do you record, as you said, a lot of long form content? Do you record short form content, or it's not something that you typically do?
Oh, I've experimented with both. When I first started YouTube, it got to the point where I would be at a farmer's market and people would tell me, like, you gotta like do YouTube or something. Like it's just it like it all tied together. And I just like, yeah, maybe one day I'd put it off until one day this lady came up and like, you gotta start it today. Like, even if you don't have a camera person, you just find a way, just figure it out. And so I'm sitting there at home. I got, nice home, and I have all these jugs, gallons of water. I thought, let me just set up the phone, turn it and just try to just figure it out. It took like hours of like, okay, that shot's not right. Try this. And I didn't have a lot of luck with long form videos because when you upload it on the phone, I might just have like an older phone. It like times out and it kicks you off the app after a minute. So I thought, all right, maybe let's try short form. And some of the, 3 minutes or less is a sweet spot, 1 to 3. And, I would put a video up, 3,000 views like that. I'm like, whoa. Like, that's pretty wild, and then some I get, like, 1. There's a whole week, there's just 1 view. So, a lot of it, I think I kinda just started having fun with different ideas. Things would come to me, like, today, part of lunch, I have these roasted sweet potatoes, and the thing's, like, bigger than my face, like, that would make a fun video, and or, like, a cow or actually, my most popular video is bee pollen lemonade. And I came up with it. I thought, oh, that's a good recipe from the book. Let me just, juice some turmeric, some lemon, some ginger, raw honey, and show people how to make like ice cube trays, like, just wacky stuff like that. And the main thing too is I post every day. So the range is 1 to 3 a day. More than 3, you don't really get a lot of more advantage to the notification game. So a lot of it is that consistency. And I guess one of my unfair advantages among everything else is when I was younger, I took a lot of speech classes. So when I was in college, they like, you got to take speech. I'm like, all right, let's give speeches. And then I always had a smile on my face, and what's the topic? All right, let's just run with it. And they're like, you're not going to prepare for your speech? I'm like, no, let's just do it right now. And even in high school, I had in 10th grade, I had a lot of great teachers, but Mrs. Scarborough took a liking to me. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Napoleon Dynamite.
Um, what?
It was Napoleon Dynamite. So it's about a teenager. He does like FFA. He's going to like the fair, and he's got He's got kind of like an afro, very imaginative young boy. And I was kind of like that Napoleon Dynamite in FFA. Like I did all the competitions and judging and stuff. And like, hey, you should like, you're on a farm. You should go and get all these pigs and like show them at the fair. And I had like the little mustache. I'm like, all right, this would be fun. And that's what I did. I would show produce, baked all these zucchini breads and things. And she would come to the farm and she's like, hey, you need to go to the fair, and then we would go to the fair. And eventually she's like, I think you're good enough to do these, it's like a FFA, like speech competitions. And I'm like, I don't know about that. That's a lot of work. I'd like food and pigs and all that. That's more my thing. And she made it part of the class where we had to go up in front of the class, give a speech, 5 paragraphs. And I was terrified. I'm like, I'm just sweating. There's like cool sweat down there. I had this big Korean like black trench coat. I was a scared looking dude. And I'm like, I just don't know. And so I gave a speech and she's like, well, I'm on the way to giving a speech. And she's like, well, if you don't do it, you fail the class. So I'm like, you know, I have no choice now. So I have to give the speech. And so I do it. And she's like, all right, you did really good. Could tweak a few things. In a few weeks, there's this chapter for the FFA in the area. You're going to be up front, and there's 2 people giving speeches. You're one of the 2. I'm like, oh, all right, that's whatever. I didn't even have the money to get like a FFA coat. It was a big, or jacket, I guess. It was a big deal. And they're like, don't worry, you can use one of ours. And so I go up that night and there's like 200 people in this ag hall. I'm like, wow, I'm really scared now. This is, heart's beating. And it was me and this lady, and she got really nervous, ran off stage. And the teacher came up and said, well, as long as you just give a speech, you win the competition. So I'm like, all right, let's do it. And I walk out there and I'm just like, the heart's beating. And I give a speech and I won. And she comes up and she's like, hey, you won. It was like $100 check and you win the. I'm like, wow, I didn't get paid to give speeches. This is kind of cool. And so we're tidying up. She's like, well, there's a regional competition. I want you to go to that one too. It's like, oh boy, so I'm all right. So I go to that one and it's for like $250. There's 4 people. And I go up, give a speech. I win that one. I'm like, okay, I got some momentum here. Let's go for round 3. And she's like, no problem. This summer, you're going to the state competition. There's like 7 people. You're one of the 7. And I go and I'm like, oh, I got this one in the bag. This is no problem. And I come dead last. And just like, okay, maybe I do have to work on my speeches more. But when I lived in West Virginia, one of the things I did, not just practicing, but I I would talk to all the animals. I go out in the woods, hiking, walking, and it was just kind of that flow state of you just keep getting better. And I guess long story short, when you can speak in front of people, that's a huge advantage. And then moving to like now, doing farmers markets for about 7, almost 8 years consecutively. I've done, I think, well, actually, no, not 7, 8 farmers markets since I started. And it's just, you're always talking to just hundreds, thousands of people and how to like work a crowd. You get like one person to talk to. All of a sudden they're looking at a table. There's 2 people, then you get a big crowd coming and how to handle, objection. There's a lot of negative people, but there's also a lot of good people too. Having people walk around we have this thing called a big box at our farmers markets. So it'd be a big master case box. This one gentleman came up in our first year and said, hey, can I buy just like a whole bunch of them? Like just like a big box. And I said, all right, yeah, here you go. And I gave it to him. And he's like, I'm going to buy 100. 100? Like we're selling little 12 packs. This is like alarming. And so he gives me $100. I'm like, wow, that's really cool. And obviously it's gone up a little bit over the years, but people would walk around these markets with a giant box and like, what's going on? And then it had the branding WhyBars. Why not? And like, that's the coolest thing. So it all kind of ties together and just when you built enough little customers, it spreads organically and, being good to people, it comes back around. It really does.
I think how to speak is something that is super important. And I even had a guest here that does that for a living. He teaches people how to speak, because, and he's super professional. And we did some live exercises and it blew my mind. It actually, people in front of you could be friends, family, customers, investors, you don't know who's in, right? So she said, you need to know how to work an audience, how to influence them as well. Not how to manipulate them in a bad way, but how to influence them in a good way. So it could be your own customer base, as a community as a whole. So yeah, I think it's super important, as you said. So I want to fast forward a little bit because I love your story and everything that pushed you into this, and I'm trying to, in this brief time that we're together, trying to understand more about who you are and why you created this. That's amazing. But then what about growth? How is that going throughout the years? Are you like you started, many years ago, based on what I understand, right? Things have changed drastically.
Oh yeah.
That socioeconomically speaking, technically speaking, iOS 14 and all this stuff. So how do you handle that? How do you approach growth?
Well, for me, growth it's every day. I always give this analogy when I don't have much of on my not my wife's family. She has much bigger family than I do, but I only really talk to my uncle now. And he gave me the story one time about grandma and grandpa, and I'd always ask them like, "Hey, what'd they do?" And they were both cooks in their own right. One was a cafeteria cook and worked in factories making hubcaps, and then my uncle's Uncle Frank. So his dad was also Frank. He was a cook in North Africa in the army. So what are the odds? I come from a long line of army cooks. And
Right.
I said, well, tell me all these stories. And he would tell me, and he's like, but there's one thing though you should know. And I'm just like on the edge of my seat because that's like, older guys have the best stories. I'm like, what else could you tell me? He's like, in general, we come from a long line of lazy losers. I said, "What do you mean about that, Frank? That's kind of weird. Like, that's not really encouraging for a young guy like me." And he's like, "We've just always been that way, and your mom's like that. To a certain extent, I'm like that. We're just lazy, and we don't really amount to much." And it kind of stuck with me because it's like, well, I don't want to be like that. That's not really a great outlook to have, I think. And I always tell people you try to give as much of your story as you can because even I'm here in Troy, grew up in, Royal Oak, Madison Heights, that area. And, I was homeless at 11, living on the streets, living in vans, hanging out in liquor stores during the day. So, for me, like there was like nowhere to go but up. And then, eventually getting, in the foster care, that was like a whole like traumatic experience. And there was a lot of paths I could have taken of like, drugs, alcohol, different things. And eventually, when you're in, as they call the system, I saw a lot of the dark side of humanity. And there's a lot of good. Sadly, there's just like year after year of like, wow, this is just getting worse and worse. And eventually, I had kind of I guess what you call like an identity crisis, where at 13 they're like, hey, you're in your second home, you should just give up, and we're your family now. Like people that are fostering me, and who I eventually found out were doing a lot of crimes. It's really sad what they did to the kids, and eventually I just kind of gave up for a while. I'm like, I'm just this new person. And there was like this, what they call the gun to the head, where you got to pick a new name or else. And so I had that for like 16 years. It took a while because when I was an adult, I was on my own. I kept that name because I'm like, I was so afraid of like breaking out of that paradigm. And eventually, I got married on, you know what? I'm going to reclaim my name. That was a huge part of my growth and with identity of like, I could die happy knowing I've got my name back. I mean, it may be insignificant to a lot of people. But after I got married 6 years ago, we go to the courthouse, you got to pay all this money, put an ad in the paper saying, "Hey guys, this guy wants to change his name." Maybe it's just a whole string of hoops you got to jump through. And we go up to the judge, and 9 a.m., she's got the gavel, and we're the first ones up. And she's like, "All right, Mr. Y, do you want to change your name?" The big Y. And I told her, I said, "Well, Your Honor, it's been a really big dream of mine, and I'm ready to change it." And the whole room, there's like maybe 100 people in this room, just pin drop silence. And they're just looking around. And I would imagine you don't want to crush someone's dreams on Monday at 9 a.m. So she's like, all right, that's a good enough reason. And do the gavel. And shortly thereafter, I got my name back. And it was like, nothing. I was like on the top of the world, like nothing could touch me because it's like I was. I guess you would call it as a point of being complete. Like all humans, they seek completion, and obviously to some extent we never get there. But for me, it was just like to grow as a person. Like I'm never gonna give up, and I always had the dream of like reconnecting with my parents, which eventually I did. And I had a lot of my friends in college like you just got to go find it. Like you got to figure it out. I went on some websites, paid $7, and like poof, here's all these addresses and numbers. Eventually reconnect with Uncle Frank, found where mom and dad lived, and eventually moved back up here to Michigan. And not so much, pick up where I left off or make up for lost time, but just keep going. Be present, be with them. And long story short, it worked for a few years, but as I got older, we kind of grew apart. And it's a weird position to be in a growth phase, being in my mid 30s now, where it was painful to lose them once shortly after 9/11, so 2001. But then I went through all this like growth and all the pain and trauma, and I found them again, reconnected, didn't work out, and I lost them a second time. That was tough. Where I don't know if a lot of people can relate to that when you go to the holidays, you go to see your family, and they lock you out. They don't answer their phones for whatever reason. I could never figure out, and they just. A lot of people talk about cutting out toxic people out of their life, and they're like, I can't talk to so and so or an old friend. 100%, I get that, but it's weird when those people cut you out. That's a different like I don't know how to describe it really. It's like wow, I'm in that regard very alone. But I guess in another sense, whether you call it God or spirit, there's always something that's gonna push you forward. So even if those people really weren't meant to be in your life, there's always kind of that zigzag. You're gonna go where the universe wants to take you. I guess you'd call it like going with the flow. So, and that's obviously having a good wife. That's not a bad thing either. It's I guess you call it my other half because, without that, it's like, man, I'd be probably maybe homeless still. It's just, you gotta have that good support system. And it's just every day you're just like, I'm not going back to that. It's just, I'd rather hang out the rich people and go in that lane than be, stuck in poverty forever. It's just, I think, I get a lot of flack for this, but people here in Birmingham, city next to us, they're very, wealthy and upscale people. A few miles down the street, there's, Pontiac, and it's totally opposite. And having seen both sides, I'm like, man, I'm hanging out with the rich people. In general, they're way better. So it's just, and it's not so much just to be rich and have a lot of money, but it's the energy and also what you can do with that. I think a lot of people forget, a lot of people, there's a lot of hate and blame for all those evil rich people, but then we work all day just to get money and energy just like them. So it's an interesting way to look at it, I guess.
First off, I wanted to thank you for sharing that story. And I think that we all say that sometimes we take things for granted, different things, could be small things, big things. But you took that to a whole different level. So it's a humbling, experience for me because it's like, am I complaining for days an hour ago?
Mhm.
And this story to claim his name back. So it's like at the beginning of the call, I think even before we started recording the episode, you said that you wanted to focus on positive things, right? And that you are an optimistic, right? And there's bad things going on, but you like to focus on the positive things. And that's something that many people can say, including myself.
Mhm.
But it takes like a lot to be an optimistic going through what you have gone through. So I wanted to, congratulate you. It does nothing, of course, but I feel in a position to say that some people have things easy and we complain about the small stuff.
Oh yeah.
I originally asked you about business growth, and many people, complain about they're not growing X and they're growing 2.8X and Y and fire people in like for that, and they are depressed for that. And it's like, wait, like there are some people that got things like they started from a totally different place and they're more optimistic than you. So yeah,
I think
congrats.
it's also a big thing when I talk to a lot of people at the markets and they always ask me like, what's your story? And I try to condense it like really in a small of a package as I can. I'm like, well, it's a lot much bigger story than here. A lot of the entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs, I ask them really a key question. I say, are you looking to build a brand to sell, or are you going to run a forever business? And it's not like, one's better or worse. It depends on the path you want to take, but they're two totally different like paths. So like in my case, it's very intense. It's work every day to build this brand up. It's a whole different mindset to build and sell it. Get paid to go away, and then you can take that money and do either another venture or help the world in some way. Very, very specific path. Whereas a lot of people, they want to have a forever business that's slower. They can take their time more. You think of farmers, shop owners, things of that nature. They're definitely needed in the world. But a problem I found is a lot of people try to do the opposite, where they're a forever business trying to be a brand to sell, and they're two conflicting things at the same time, and vice versa. Very much like in weightlifting. I've for a while dabbled in not so much bodybuilding, but just working out high intensity, just really improving the physique of, for myself. And a lot of my friends are into like powerlifting or high volume, and they're trying to do high intensity and high volume, and they end up getting injured. They're trying to do two separate things at the same time. So I think really defining a path you want to take and knowing you're going to zigzag, nothing's going to go according to plan, you'll still feel fulfilled in that pursuit. Even like now we're facing challenges internally, not so much, I guess, cash flow, but just trying to figure out what models work. Where like back when we first started, we only wanted to do brick and mortar stores, which has been successful. But as we find now, more people want to shop online. Amazon's obviously the go-to. And then for us, we found that more people want to shop the small businesses, small websites. It's kind of been I guess you call it an anti-Amazon scent, which I'm still trying to wrap my head around as well. But I think more people are going to the small markets, small entrepreneurs. And I would say that this next 5, 10 years is going to be huge growth for the entrepreneurs in general. It's just, you got to look for those opportunities. And I guess they always say strike while the iron's hot, because whatever's worked in the past isn't necessarily going to work now. Things are going to change and evolve. I had a gentleman the other day say that you can't make money selling anything online. And I just laughed. I'm like, it was just funny. It just made me laugh. Like, well, that's one way to look at it, but it's the whole world is on the internet right now. So um, so obviously I don't argue with people. I just let the results speak for themselves.
Yeah, 100%. And you speaking about changes and everything that's going on with AI, agentic e-commerce, conversational commerce. There are many definitions, many things going on at the same time. The other day, OpenAI, let's say, released a web browser. They released an integration with Shopify, Walmart, Etsy, Instacart, so you can buy without leaving ChatGPT. So it's not a deep present. Probably it's a present announcement, but it's not the 90% of people using it right now that way. But it's going to be pretty soon, because it's very overwhelming, right? Because, but I think that everything will find a way, because it's like TV was going to kill radio and online was going to kill offline. It's not going to, of course, it's going to change many things, but we need to probably experiment. But yeah, it's something else to test. So I don't want to take more time from you. You've been very generous so far. It was a very interesting story. It started as an e-com episode, but it turned out to be something way more deep and interesting to me, because we discuss e-com all day long in every episode for the last 200 plus episodes. This is like getting behind the founder, mindset story, fears, like everything comes from a place for every of us, right? We are who we are because of who we were in the past, what we learned, what we didn't learn, the good, the bad, the ugly. So I appreciate, and I wanted to thank you again for sharing that story, because it's not easy, but it's part of who you are, what shaped you into what you are right now, and what you want to do in life and business, and what you don't want to do. So again, once again, yeah, I wanted to thank you. And for those who want to learn more about WhyBars, where can they go?
So we are available online at www.whybars.com. Primarily, we're based here in Metro Detroit, here in Michigan. The biggest stores you guys recognize would be all the Krogers in Michigan, Whole Foods, Fresh Thymes. We go as far south as Texas and like Central Market. But nationwide, on our website, we have a store locator list. So we just refresh. Nationwide, we're in about 450 stores out. Also on Amazon, we're kind of reshifting our focus more to our website. And then weekly, on average, we do about 3 farmers markets a week. So Eastern Market in Detroit, Birmingham Market in Birmingham on Sundays, Northville on Thursdays, and then occasionally we'll do Lansing in the summer. But the best place WhyBars.com.
Amazing. So for you listening or watching stuff, thank you. It means a lot. Give us a thumbs up. If you're on YouTube, subscribe, leave us a review. Of course, a positive one. No, I'm kidding. Leave us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts if you're there. And if you are not on the website, if you head on over to the DTCinsider.com and find the podcast section. Once you find the episode, you will be able to see the website. I know it's a lot of instructions, but it's not that really. It's really easy, and you'll find the show notes. Then, of course, I'll include the name of the books. I would love to do that. And of course, the website. And are you on LinkedIn? Yes, you are. We connected that way. So Jay's LinkedIn as well. And of course, the social media handle. So you can check them out there. Okay, once again, thank you for being on the podcast.
Very good. Thanks for having me.
This episode was brought to you by BSR Digital. We help DTC brands grow through paid ads and email marketing campaigns. If you'd like us to help your business grow, head on over to bsrdigital.com and schedule a call with us.